I was sitting there thinking, like, if we win this case, I'm going to be extremely disappointed.
Sometimes the hardest part of a case is realizing which side you're really on. Welcome to Make Your Case, the podcast where attorneys break down the most impactful cases of their careers and the stories behind them. I'm Joe Douglas, longtime investigative reporter and founder of Clear Eyed Media, where we make legal videos that help lawyers win cases and boost settlements. Today's guest is criminal defense attorney Joshua Barron. He talks about what drew him to defending people instead of prosecuting them, the storytelling insight that helped him win a major drug case, and the moment he realized a prosecutor might actually have more power than a judge. Josh, thanks for being here. And if you could go ahead and just introduce yourself and tell us where you are and what you do.
Yeah, my name's Josh Barron. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Lehi, Utah. Um, I've been practicing criminal defense since 2009, and before that, I was a prosecutor for a little bit, and then before that, a real estate litigator for like 5 minutes. And yeah, so we have an enormous family and a family bakery, and yeah, we love our neighborhood.
An enormous family and a family bakery. I got to ask right off, like, how big is your family?
So we have 12 kids. We have three biological, nine adopted. And we have a family bakery thing that's called Cups and Cakes um, that employs the kids, but then also raises money for foster care.
That's amazing. That sounds so
Yeah.
cool. And then
Yeah.
I also just want to address right off the top, you have some instruments in the background that people are going to wonder about. And what's that? Do
I
you do that as a for fun, or are you a
do.
singing lawyer? Or
I try to play the guitar every day, and when I'm getting anxious, I can tell it's because I haven't played I've waited too long. So yeah, I try to play every day. I'm probably better at buying guitars than I am at playing them, but I enjoy both.
that's great. That sounds fun and kind of a balanced person. That's good. So the you went from real estate law to criminal defense. Is that correct?
Yeah, real estate, then prosecuting, and then criminal defense. So I graduated in '07. My kind of plans changed last minute because my wife and I got married during my third year of last law school, so I had to kind of scramble to find a job. Took a job in Park City doing real estate litigation. Couldn't have hated it more. Just absolutely despised it. So then I decided to try the most different thing I could think of. So I worked as a prosecutor for Salt Lake City for a little bit over a year and really actually enjoyed it, but felt like I was more a fit for criminal defense. So in 2009, I started a criminal defense firm with a good friend who has since retired, and now it's me and one other attorney and a couple of paralegals.
So why did you feel that criminal defense would be a better fit than prosecution?
My nickname at the prosecutor's office was the defense lawyer from almost the first day. Like they saw my offers and they were like, "This guy." At first, I was kind of offended because I really planned to be a career prosecutor when I took that job. But just like over and over again, I just noticed that my sympathy was on the other side of the room, on the other side of the courtroom. So it's not that, I mean, I think prosecutors are amazing, and I think that they have more opportunity to do good than most defense lawyers. But it just was a personality fit. Yeah, not like an ideological problem, but just a personality fit that I was just more focused on. Well, how can we help this person? How can we overcome this versus being focused on punishment?
You said that there's more opportunities to do good as a prosecutor versus a defense attorney.
Yeah, yeah.
What do you mean?
So at least 95% of criminal cases end in a plea bargain. And in many, many, many of those cases, the huge majority, the judge really doesn't have very much discretion on what the sentence is going to be. It's already determined by the parties. So if you go into a courtroom, your eye naturally goes to the judge. The judge feels like they're the center. But the truth is that the center of power in a courtroom is the prosecutor. They make the charging decisions, sentencing recommendations, plea bargain offers. So, a good prosecutor is like one of the most, when I find out that a prosecutor I really like is becoming a judge, sometimes I mean, I'm happy for them because there's like maybe an upgrade in prestige and things like that. But in terms of, you know, which one I think is going to make my life better, it's usually the prosecutor. So, yeah, prosecutors, when they make their plea bargain offers, they're usually kind of deciding the outcome of the case. Lots of my cases, there's not even really a question of whether my clients are guilty of something very similar to what they're charged with. The question is, what's the penalty going to be? Sometimes I have cases with clients who are innocent or clients who claim innocence, and but there's a lot where it's a DUI, it's on video, we all know what happened, and it's really a question of should they go to jail or should they be put into a program, or what's the right way to address the issue.
So then, if you had this label early on in the prosecutor's office, and you've kind of gone with it, why? Why did you feel like you were drawn to being, or even getting that label, and why are you doing that now? What drew you to it?
I mean, like there was a moment. I mean, talking about cases that are turning points. I had this case when I was a prosecutor. It was a DUI, and the evidence was just bad. It was really not. It was a terrible case, and the defense attorney on the other side was like the best DUI lawyer in the state. He was just so good. And the officer had lost the body camera video. He had done the field sobriety tests wrong. We didn't have a chemical test. Like it was just a terrible case. So the morning of the trial, I was like dragging myself out of bed, like, oh, I wish I didn't have to try this case. The defense attorney made an offer to me of, we'll plead to reckless driving, but we won't do a DUI. And I went to my boss and I was like, that is a gift. This case is garbage. We have to take this. And they said, no, no, we'd rather lose. Just go, and there's no dishonor. Like go and lose, and that's fine. So we go, and he's crossing. Like it took all day, and he's just destroying my witnesses. The officer found the video that had been missing during the trial. Like it was so bad. So I was sitting there thinking, like, if we win this case, I'm going to be extremely disappointed. Like I do not, And so I just thought, like, why am I doing something where I'm kind of rooting for the other guy? Like, let's let the good prosecutors be good prosecutors, and I'm going to go be a defense lawyer. I also, though, I mean, like to be candid, it's partly that kind of just personality and philosophy. But my dad was a small business owner. His dad was a small business owner. So there was a lot of appeal in not having a boss. There was a supervisor that I had when I was a prosecutor who um, she'd like come into my office and be like, "Hey, I saw that you left at 4:55 yesterday. Like, what was that about?" And I would be like, "Oh gosh, get me out of here." So there was a number of factors that kind of came together.
Yeah, and so that's a good way of saying it. I mean, there's a sense of you're a business owner and you are kind of calling your own shots. Is that part of what you enjoy about it?
I really do. I really do. I enjoy the marketing side, the business side. I really like that's probably where I spend the most of my time thinking.
Yeah, and so how does so as an attorney, as a defense lawyer, what are some of the unique challenges though you face like, as a business owner and someone who's kind of doing it all on your own essentially? I mean, you have a partner, or sounds like an attorney you work with,
Yeah.
but you're kind of running the ship as I
Yeah.
take it, or
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that part I don't think is. I mean, I do enjoy working with people, and so like a little bit over a year ago, I was more of a true solo. I was kind of miserable. Like the business was doing fine, we were making really good money and things were, but like I just wasn't enjoying going to work every day, and that's kind of what prompted me to push towards this partnership with this other attorney, and it's gone fantastic. So, but I mean, like one of the funny business challenges that you might not initially think about is like most businesses, the better work they do, the more likely their clients are to recommend them to their friends and family. So there's this survey called the Net Promoter Score that is like one of the most robust predictors of business growth, which is it's just a one question survey. How likely are you to recommend us to a friend or family member? Um, the challenge for criminal defense firms is like my ideal client is like a dentist or a doctor or somebody who gets, charged with a domestic violence case or DUI or, a felony or something like that. If I get him the best possible outcome or her the best possible outcome, I don't really expect them to be out with their friends and be like, man, when I got my DUI, like you should talk to Josh Barron. Like, like it's not something that I don't think it's out of disloyalty to me, but they don't want to talk about the worst moment in their life with their friends. So a business problem that like we've been thinking about for the last, 15 plus years is how do you create an environment for referrals where your clients may not be the best source of referrals because they may not want to talk about what you did for them.
Yeah, that's always a tough situation in this field, and I find the same thing too is with like showing my videos because I can't show any of them really because they're like
Confidential.
I'm working on a case right now that's like extremely private for a number of very understandable reasons,
Yeah.
and uh, and I mean I'd understand why I can't show this one, but there's others that yeah, it's a tough situation, but I do have you get referrals and you try to people who can speak to your work, but it is a tough challenge. So you're in your practice and in your just in your whole career, whether it be whatever field you're in, what is a case for you that sticks out as something really notable that you learned from, or that was a big win for you, or maybe wasn't at all a big win for you that just really is something you kind of you think about?
Yeah, I mean, one that has been just like a real guiding case for me was so I went from being a real estate litigator in Park City to coming to be a prosecutor at Salt Lake City. And when I was in Park City, if I wanted to send like an email to a client saying that we'd received their documents, I had to get like approval from my boss and he would redline it 100% of the time. Like 100. Like it was extremely micromanaged. So I came to Salt Lake City. I came on a Monday. We had like 3 days of human resources training. And then for that Friday, they said we've got a jury trial calendar scheduled. Um, you prep this one. It's probably not going to be the one that goes. There's 14 other cases, but you prep this one. And just by coincidence, all the other cases settled or had to get continued, and my case was the one that went. And so they said, "Well, you're going to be the first chair." I was like, "Are you kidding me? I don't know what I'm doing." And they're like, "Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. This is so." It was a DUI, and it was a case where the driver had refused the chemical test, so we didn't have a chemical test, and I just had no idea what I was doing. I had a really experienced officer who had been the investigating officer, and he kind of like propped me up throughout the trial. Like I would ask him a really stupid question, and then he would answer a different question, and it was like anyway. So he just kind of dragged me through the trial. So we're doing closing arguments, and I had decided that my most important piece of evidence was the one of the field sobriety tests, which is called horizontal gaze nystagmus. Um, and it's kind of a technical test. So I get up to do my closing argument and I'm explaining, I'm getting myself into it, I'm kind of like performing and I say, the most important evidence in this case is, and then I couldn't remember the words horizontal gaze nystagmus. I just learned it the day before. So that's my only defense. But like, so it's my most crucial piece of evidence, and I have to tell the jury, like, oh, the eye test, you know which one I'm talking about, and so anyway, I did this trial. I did every single thing wrong. Like I did, my direct examination was a mess. My closing argument was a mess. Like it was just all, and I got to the end of it. It was a guilty verdict because being a prosecutor is kind of super easy. But I like felt something while I was doing the trial, even though I was not good at it yet. Like I had this like electricity where I was like, I want to do this. I really like this. Like this environment, doing this sounds fun. So yeah, I mean, I didn't realize yet that I was probably going to be a defense attorney, but being in court and doing trials is, yeah, I mean, it's exhausting. Like it's a little bit less appealing to me now than it was then because I had so much energy back then. Um, but yeah, like there was some glimpse of something that I got during that trial that really helped my career.
So that's interesting, though. It's a very honest, and the big word now is authentic, but that was a good authentic sort of real take. Because you don't often hear people say, and that happens to everyone in every field where you start out and you're in over your head and you're screwing up. And the fact that you said, "This is what I want to do," what are you just a masochist or what is
No,
why did you have that buzz from that? Where did that come from? I mean, I'm joking, but I mean, like,
no.
what gave you that feeling?
Yeah, like because I, I tend to not like to do most things. They have those like personality tests, and it's like how open are you to new experiences? I tend to be pretty not open. Like I'm not super spontaneous and want to do lots of different things. But there have been a few things like I played piano from the age of 7 to 15, and I never liked it. Like I was a competent piano player, like I could, but like I didn't. I was never like this is amazing. And then I took maybe a year off of really playing music at all. And then, I was home and had nothing to do, and my dad's guitar was there, and I picked it up and I started kind of messing around with it. And like I was hooked. I had seen guitars before, but I had never tried to play it. I was hooked, and I wasn't good yet, but there was like just like a connection with the instrument. And so I feel like it was kind of similar to that, but like, I had seen trials. I'd done some mock trials in law school, and it was all fine, but I didn't have that same sense of like, oh, this is. And then, standing in front of that jury and kind of trying to connect with them, or listening to. I don't remember all the details, but there was a moment in the cross examination where the driver was testifying and I was cross examining her, and she said something, and I was like, oh, what did you just say? Like, it was just so. I think that some attorneys can be very dependent on notes during cross-examination and, following their script. And I think I have a little bit of a talent for being able to just be there and be really focused on the witness, be present with them. And there's like a connection that the jury can see, and I can, find those little nuggets that you can't plan for and you didn't expect. So yeah, so there's like a glimpse. Again, like it's funny to like enjoy something even before you're good at it. Usually I don't have that experience. Like if um my sister wants me to play in a rec league softball thing, and I grew up playing baseball, but I haven't played since I was 13, and I just refuse to be bad at it. So almost for sure I'm never going to do it. But every now and then I'll do something where even though I'm bad at it, I just can't get enough of it.
Did you get a sense that you would be good at it though? Did you go to have a glimmer of like, or was it more the experience? You enjoyed the buzz of like the actual experience.
Yeah, I mean, like, so this is embarrassing to say, but I read years ago something that said that trial lawyers and actors tend to have similar personality profiles.
Hmm.
And that was kind of surprising to me because, like, I've never wanted to be an actor, but, like, I really enjoy being at the podium and having everyone in a courtroom looking at me. I love that. And I love standing in front of a jury, doing my closing argument, and being less like obsessed with, like, it's not like a written document. I'm not going to read something to them, but trying to connect with these people that can't really respond. It's like this weird environment, but like those, yeah, that kind of presence is really exciting to me. I'm embarrassed that like the amount of attention that I get during a trial is gratifying to me, but it 100% is. I really enjoy it.
Well, I mean it's not embarrassing if it's honest and true. I mean that's what drives you to. I mean that's what brought you to it. So that I mean that's a case where uh you had to learn a lot from. Thankfully, you had an outcome that was desirable, probably for your employer, if you had resulted in a
Yeah.
conviction or and but then like what's a case where maybe you felt better or you felt like is there another more a notable case where you kind of felt like wow I'm doing this and it works or it was maybe a kind of an antithesis to that case where
Yeah. Yeah, there was a case that I had a couple of years ago. Um, so my client was charged with aggravated robbery. No,
hmm
sorry, aggravated burglary. The kind of undisputed facts were that he had gotten extremely high on methamphetamine and kind of like wandered around kind of his neighborhood doing like really bizarre things, like swearing at people, kicking a truck, and eventually went to this garage. And this man and his special needs son were in the garage working on like their model train set or something super sympathetic. And he like went into the garage, maybe not knowing where he was. When they yelled at him to get out, he pulled something off like a piece of wood off of the side of the garage, and like was like trying to attack them with it. And the dad like got behind the truck and was shooting him with a BB gun, and eventually he left. So the question in the case was not whether he had gone in there. It was all undisputed. It was a question of whether he had the mental state to be actually committing the crime. Like, was he so intoxicated that he was just out of it? And so the this dad is testifying, the dad that was in the garage, and he is the most sympathetic. He's one of the most sympathetic witnesses I've ever. He's just really connected with the jury, very folksy. Like
hmm
he's revealing stuff that hadn't been clear in the report, like his son has Down syndrome, and all the damage was to his Down syndrome son's model train set. Like we're really struggling. So the point of my cross examination of this guy is that my client was totally like off his rocker while this was happening. Like, so normally I want to kind of maybe downplay what my client did. I'm trying to do the opposite. I'm trying to say like he was, and he was yelling at this guy throughout, and I was pretty sure that my client had been swearing. Like he wasn't just like he was like cursing at this guy while he's in his.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to use that to show like he's not reasonable. He's not in his right mind. He's just and so I have the farmer guy dad on the stand and I'm saying, okay, so he's yelling, he's screaming, yeah, he's out of control, yeah, you're scared, yeah, your son's there, he's scared. And he's not just yelling, he's cursing at you. And he like stopped and he's like, yeah, he was yelling. And I'm like, but what was he yelling? He's like, he's yelling stuff. And I was like, so like, tell me, like, what are the words that he's using? And he's like, you're not gonna get me to say bad words on the stand. And I was like, no, I mean, like, this isn't a trick or anything. I just want to know. And so we went round and around for like 5 or 10 minutes. Like, it was really embarrassing. Like, I lost control of the cross. I just lost it. I had to like finally just be like, hey, I'm sorry, you're not gonna say it. Sat down. Like, I didn't ever get rehabilitated. So it was like this moment of like, man, I got schooled by that guy, but then I was doing the closing argument and it kind of all came together and we won on all the counts we were hoping to win. And I was just so happy for my client. And he got convicted of lesser offenses that, again, we knew he was going to get convicted on, but we won on the aggravated burglary charge. So then we came back for sentencing on the lesser charges a few weeks later, and there were two attorneys that had done the case for the prosecution, and I was meeting with the other prosecutor before we went in on sentencing, and I was like, and I really respected one of them. He'd been at that DA's office for a really long time, and I was like, do you have any feedback on that case? Like, you're really good at this. You've been doing this for decades. Like, do you have any, like, is there anything that you think I could work on and do better? And he was like, that cross was a disaster. And I was like, I know. I'm going to get the transcript of it to remind myself, like, how well I got schooled on that. But he said, I think you won in the closing argument. I thought it was one of the best closing arguments I've ever seen. And I was just like blown away that he would say that to me. I thought it was very generous. Like, I just quote unquote beat him and his trial partner, um, he's at a point in his career where he doesn't have to keep track of wins and losses anymore. Like his job is
Mm-hmm.
secure. He's doing what he wants to do. But I just thought that was so cool of him to, I don't know, like it would be hard for me to say that to myself without him, because I'd worry that maybe I couldn't see it clearly. I just thought it was so kind of him to say that. So I did. I went and ordered the audio of it, made sure that I knew what I had done so I could try to repeat it. But yeah, I mean, I felt good while I was doing it, and then getting his validation afterwards meant a lot to me.
Did you agree with him after you heard it again?
Yeah, I did a really good job in that closing.
What did you think you did well?
Um, so that one of the tricks in trial work and in closing arguments especially is that you have to connect with these jurors and the jurors have to be mute. So like it's like a weird thing where it's like one way flow of information almost. So you're not getting a lot back from them. And so you have to like sense. So like sometimes I notice that prosecutors can be kind of condescending to juries, that they can tend to like over explain stuff that they already probably understand or kind of treat them like they're dumb. And I think that what the reason is probably like they just don't want to assume that they understood. And so they want to kind of over explain. And my hope is that when I'm doing closing that I can get some nonverbal cues and kind of put myself in their shoes and try to use some empathy and say, I think they understand this part and they don't understand this other part. So it's a really delicate, difficult thing to do. And I probably don't get it right all the time because like everyone's overconfident in their ability to perceive those kinds of things. But I just want to like be respectful of the jury and not try to do their job for them, not tell them. I think a lot of attorneys are trained to tell them like you have to do X, and of course that provokes resistance from the jury. They don't want to be bossed around. They want to make their own decision. So I don't know. I think I try to be kind of open with them and like tell them like I was really upset by this part of the case too. Like, you know, be open about how my emotions have evolved over the course of the case and then hopefully communicate to them and then give them the tools so that they can do their job and not try to do it for them.
Yeah, that's cool. So it's like a combination of, from what I'm listening and hearing you say, of you obviously have to make a case. You have to get your facts presented to the jurors, but you also don't want to force ram it down their throats, and you want to empower them.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I did the Criminal Defense Lawyers Association asked me to do a presentation on jury selection and working with juries. And so I got a chance to like sit and think about like what are the conditions? What do you have to have happen in order for a jury to acquit or to to find the verdict that you want? Like so like first they have to be able to pay attention. Like they can't process like so if you're so boring that they zone out, you don't have any chance. But the
Right.
ultimate goal is to not just convince a juror, but convince a juror and turn them into an advocate for your position. Like that's the ultimate goal. Because there's probably going to be people who are kind of on the fence, and then you can't go into the jury room. So you need a juror or multiple jurors to say, no, like here's what I feel, here's why I feel it, here's the parts of the case that you want to give them the tools to be able to advocate to the jurors who maybe feel differently or are undecided. And and I think that attorneys tend to overvalue the technical, factual part of it and undervalue like the emotional decision that the jurors have to make. Like they have to use their emotions to say, do I think this person is telling the truth? Do I trust this person? And so like in closing argument, it's less about like saying all these magic words and more about helping them make that emotional decision. Um, so you have to connect with their emotions and feel the same, be honest about your emotions. Like you have to create the common ground to hopefully transform some of those jurors into advocates for you.
So that's interesting. So as a storyteller, what I hear you doing is you are present. You're telling your story first person, whereas some attorneys and others, when they write a story, they try to be like a third person, almost like a godlike voice. And
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
like,
I hear you inserting yourself into the narrative a little bit. Is
yeah,
that?
a little bit,
Yeah.
a little bit. Like, and then to try to be subtle, like something that I'll say to the jury frequently is I'll say, I wasn't there. Like, I don't know. I wasn't there. I heard the witnesses. I was here with you, but I wasn't there. So I'm not trying to tell you because based on my personal knowledge, but let me
Right.
tell you what I did hear this witness say and what I heard this other witness say. Um, that storytelling thing reminded me of a case. Can I tell you another quick story
Sure.
about?
Go for it. Yeah. That's
So
what we're here for.
I had this case where my client was arrested driving from California to Illinois with like a lot of cocaine in his car in Utah.
Mhm.
And I went to lunch with a personal injury lawyer friend of mine. And I was telling him about the case, and he said that he's been studying some of this stuff. He's a trial lawyer too. He doesn't do criminal as much, but he does a fair number of trials. And he said that their research was showing that juries tend to confuse, like all people who hear a story, tend to confuse focus with causation. So, like in a normal novel, the protagonist is the one who causes the outcome of the story, and the novel is focused on that protagonist. So if I'm telling a story in court and I focus on someone, the jury's going to assume that that's the person who caused the outcome. So he was saying, if you focus on your client and then say, and the police found a bunch of cocaine, they're going to assume that he caused the police to find the cocaine.
Hmm.
And I was like, that is so I had been working on my closing argument. I went back and I changed it. And in this case, there were four people in the car when the police stopped it. My client, a good friend of his who was driving, and then two kind of strangers in the back. And the police, when they stopped him for a minor traffic thing, like immediately let the people in the back go, never even asked them their names. And so I wrote the opening statement, instead of writing it from my perspective or my client's perspective, I wrote it from the perspective of these other two people that were in the car. And because they weren't going to come to court and testify because nobody knew who they were because the police hadn't investigated it, I could basically say anything from their perspective, make it clear that it was hypothetical, but say like they can't say that that's not what they were thinking. And so our narrative was these two people in the back found someone who basically transported them and their drugs for free as a favor to this other place. And then they used him to kind of take the fall, and their plan worked perfectly. They get stopped. They're all nervous. They know the cocaine's there. My client doesn't. And then the police are like, "You guys can go," and they're like, "Oh my goodness, we found the perfect way to do this because of this poor investigation." So anyway, that trial went our way. It was a not guilty verdict, and I just thought it was interesting that he had this little story insight. Emphasis and causation tend to be confused, and it was like, oh, it was so helpful. Like the jury in that case didn't feel like a close call. Like the jury deliberated for like 30 minutes, and they were like, not guilty on all counts. So
That's really interesting. Yeah, and that goes into general storytelling across the board. I mean, when you look at like a screenwriting or anything else, if you a lot of time when you're making an outline initially, you want to figure out who your protagonist is, and it's not often who you think it is. It's like
yes,
it's
yes,
who is the person that goes in a storytelling, just storytelling. It's who goes through the most changes, who's the most interesting, who's a mess in the beginning,
yeah.
but also yeah, that's interesting because you're identifying with the outcome. So do you kind of when you build a story, do you out of a case, and obviously there's a couple of things I always ask attorneys about, which is first of all, and you kind of addressed this, but the balance, there's a tension between having to prove and factually demonstrate the evidence, obviously, versus the emotional component
Mm.
of, maybe it's the impact on whomever, or there's testimony that's emotional or emotional parts of the case. How do you balance that, the facts versus the emotions in a
Yeah,
case?
there's a book on this called I think it's called The Unrighteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And so his model of decision making, he uses this cool metaphor. He says, imagine an elephant with a rider, and the elephant. But in this, so we usually think of the rider as directing the elephant. But in his analogy, he says, don't think that. Imagine the elephant is going wherever it feels like, wherever it decides it wants to go. And then the rider is shouting explanations to passersby, trying to explain why he already wanted to go there and trying to portray himself as the decider. He said,
Mm-hmm.
that's like our minds. The elephant is our emotions, and the rider is our reasoning. So what tends to happen is our emotions take us wherever they want to go. And then our conscious mind is saying, well, the reason that I wanted to do this is because of this other thing. So in other words, juries, witnesses, everybody who's involved, we tend to make a quick emotional decision. And then the writer, the intellect, tends to look for evidence to support the emotional decision that they've already arrived at. So if that's the case, then most of the time it was really nice of that lawyer to say that he said I won the case in closing. That's like in Jonathan Haidt's model, that's probably not true because the jury probably made up their mind possibly before opening statements. Like they make up their mind probably very quickly and based on kind of their sense of just like what the dynamic is in the room. Um, and then the only other adjustment to that is though, like if there's two jurors and one makes the quick emotional decision in your favor and one makes the quick emotional decision against you, and they have to reach unanimity, then that's where you have to hope that you persuaded the one on your side well enough and gave them tools that they can try to persuade the other person and tools to defend against the other person trying to persuade them to change to their side. So, I mean, like in ways that manifests itself, like one of my first really serious felonies was a sexual assault case. And my client was a young guy in the military, and his wife came to like every appointment in my office. She was extremely supportive, stood behind him throughout the whole case. And she was gorgeous, just absolutely beautiful. So like we consciously like said, like we want you to the wife, we want you to be at the trial, we want you to sit in the front row. Whenever there's a break, we want you to communicate with the accused person. Just like pat them on the back or give them a thumbs up, like make it clear to them. Like we're never going to have testimony that you're the wife, but we want to communicate that to them. And we know that people like people that are more attractive. Like we know that there's benefits to that.
Totally.
So I mean, I don't know. It's like it's little, I don't know. Sometimes it's little things like, whether, what kind of haircut my client's going to get before trial, are they going to wear a blue shirt or a white shirt, like we have to take all the opportunities to help them make the quick emotional decision in the way we want them to.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, and that makes sense because you're getting sort of like social proof to your client that is a lot of just sort of, cave people instincts from thousands of years ago, like attractive woman like him, he must be good,
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's very shrewd. The But the other thing that's interesting though is because you talk about this case about this. So you had a client who was you weren't so much trying to get them off as though they were innocent, but you were trying to prove a point that they were not well or they were not of sound mind at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but that to me is interesting because so I talk to a lot of personal injury lawyers and plaintiffs lawyers a lot of times, and it's sort of clear what they're trying to do. Obviously, they're trying to wrong some injustice, perceived injustice or whatever, or negligence or whatever, prove. But in the case of a criminal defense lawyer, it seems interesting because it's a little more. It seems more complicated. So you're not. It's not just like, hey, this guy didn't do it. He was, whatever, like a movie or something. It may just be more complicated. So when you're dealing with that in a storytelling perspective, and how do you do that? How do you do that without honestly seeming like a sleazy lawyer, like in front of like a jury? Because obviously people come with that baked
For
into their
sure.
mind. So
For
how do
sure.
you get over that? And how do you deal with that where you're not making a really obvious point?
Um, well, I've been doing this on the defense side for what is it, 16 years now. Um, when I started, I looked like I was 15, and I can't grow the beard. To this day, I can't grow the beard. Like, so I, and it was frustrating because I don't think any of my clients were like, you know what, I want a super young looking lawyer. Like,
Yeah.
I would often get carded. I would come to the attorney part of the courtroom, and a bailiff would stop me and be like, "You can't come back here." And I'd be like, "I'm representing that guy," and he'd go, "No, you're not." And I'd have to show him my bar card. Um, so I had to decide. Like, I had to think about that. Like, it was kind of a problem, you know. But I, and so I, but I decided like the way that I'm going to connect with clients and with jurors and with prosecutors and with judges is not going to be by pretending to be the old guy. Like it's just not one of the it's not an archetype I can occupy. It's not available to me. So
Hmm.
I'm gonna just be I have to be this version. You know what I mean? Like I'm gonna kind of going back to like the authenticity thing, like I'm not a mohawk guy. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I am like the cleanest cut, most boring dressing person. And and I just have to like be that. And I think that with juries, if you're pretending and if you're trying to be something that you're not really, that can really backfire quickly. And just like being like, here, this is who I am, like this is, and leaning into that is helpful. So when we're talking about my clients, what they're going to wear to court, and we're talking about that quick emotional decision thing, there's two kind of sometimes intention concepts. Like there's kind of archetypes in our Utah culture that are convenient to be able to occupy. But again, not everyone can. Like that's just not going to be sincere. And so we have to balance like I don't want somebody up there who's like pulling on their tie the whole time because they're totally uncomfortable wearing a tie. It's not going to be effective. And so we have to figure out like, okay, what's a true version of yourself that you can portray? But then let's let go of the other versions of you or the other people that you could try to be. We're just not going to be those people. We have to choose to be a more sincere version of yourself. And my belief and my experience has been that that works better than. So, like, I have a client who's from Alabama. He's clearly not from Utah. He's going to be going to trial here in a little bit. And we're
Oh,
not going to try to make him look like a Utah Latter-day Saint missionary. We're going to make him, he's a plumber from Alabama. We're going to say that 50 times during the trial. We're not going to try to hide that. We're going to play it up. Um, so I think your question was like, I don't know. I meandered so long. I'm not sure I totally
no,
remember.
and that's okay. It's fine because as we've been talking about a lot of different stuff here, and it's interesting the way that you self-assess, like you yourself, and then you apply that to other people, and it's a frank, but it's sincere, but you do it without being harsh. It sounds like,
I hope
but
so.
which is a hard thing to do sometimes. But But I think that's probably really important. It's probably a reason why you brought that up because just as a storytelling person, you know, a lot of times when you have problems telling a story later on, you want to think about more than anything your main characters. Go back to your characters
Yeah.
and think about them. What are they like? What do they want? And then a lot of storytelling problems end up getting solved later on. Uh, you might have to go back and rewrite stuff, but you're like, okay, yeah, that doesn't make sense. This guy or this woman would never do this or whatever. So that's not, I think it is sort of related. But the issue I was talking about is so you get into as a defense attorney, a criminal defense attorney, honestly, it's really interesting stories because you're not always trying to prove like it sounds like from what you've been telling me is it's not always as simple as like, well, this woman didn't do this. She's innocent. I'm going to prove that she's innocent. And
Yeah.
that's it. It's like, it's more like from what you just said. I don't know. It's like, well, you know, we're not necessarily, you know, it's that this person is not of sound mind and is going to be found guilty except for insanity or whatever nomenclature they
Yeah.
use in your state.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or it's that yeah, she or he did this part of it, but they didn't do this part of it, and
Yeah.
they didn't do this other part that would mean, you know, whatever, and here's why. So how do you kind of like gild that lily of like, you know, without, because the risk it seems would be coming off like a sleazeball, like, oh,
Right.
well, but technically, you
Right.
know, what do you do? How do you do
Well,
that?
I mean, something that reminds me of is that I think that in law school we're programmed to contest everything. Um, and what I found is that when you and the client take responsibility for the bad facts, it builds so much credibility with the jury. Um, so, you know, it can be challenging sometimes depending on where, because my clients are kind of on a process where, you know, sometimes they've made some bad choices and sometimes they were criminal and sometimes they weren't. And, but sometimes they have some responsibility for being in criminal court. And they have to kind of go through like a grieving process where like they might be in the denial stage, they might be in the anger stage, and they haven't accepted yet, like, I did this and it was a really bad decision. And so sometimes I'm a wuss and I'm too scared to tell my client, like, no one is going to believe what you just told me. Like, I don't know whether it was true or not because I wasn't there, but I'm telling you, no juror is going to believe that. And so we have this communications lady, Melinda Bjergardsen, I think is how you pronounce her last name. And we use her for witness prep. And sometimes, like, I tell her in advance, your job is to tell him that this part doesn't make any sense. Like, no one's going to believe it because it's so hard. I don't want them to. I try to explain to them that I'm doing this out of loyalty to them and because I care about them and I want what's best for them. But sometimes it can be very, and so I sometimes bring in a second person whose job is to be like, yeah, that's not going to fly. Nobody, that doesn't sound true. um, so that's one way. Taking responsibility for my bad facts is another way. Like, um, yeah, yeah, but yeah, juries definitely start out thinking that criminal defense lawyers are terrible people, and I just have to like know that that's the starting position. Like, there's no point in being offended about it. I just have to know it, and then I have to try. Like, I went to this amazing continuing education thing on cross examination during my first year out of law school.
Mm-hmm.
The presenter was a guy named Terrence McCarthy, so good. And he was saying, well, what is your goal in cross examination? What are you trying to have happen? And he said, too many lawyers in cross examination are trying to persuade the witness to say, I was lying. And he's like, that is just never going to happen. And you're going to look bad. You're going to look bad in doing it. So he said, the goal in cross examination is not to do that. It's to look good, number one, and to make one or two points. Like, if this witness had said something different from what they're saying today, make that point, get out of there. Don't stay, don't get in, get out. And the way I interpret what he said by like look good, I think what he means is be the most reasonable person in the courtroom. Be the most reasonable person. So like an example is in law school, they tell you if you're doing cross-examination and you get some positive information out of an opposing witness,
Mm-hmm.
sit down, don't ask the next question. The next question is why why is that the case? So like, isn't it true that you previously testified that the car was blue, not red? Yes. But you today are testifying that it's red. Yes. And before you testified that it was blue. Yes. Okay. Law school says now sit down. The temptation is to say, why did your testimony change? And my feeling is you should ask the last question. It's on everyone's mind. And the other side is going to ask the question when they get up in 3 seconds to do their redirect examination.
Right.
They're going to ask that. So rather than looking to the jury like I'm trying to hide the answer to that question that I don't want, that I go, that's really interesting. Like it's really important what color the car was. You knew it was important. You knew that you were being asked that for an important reason. Help me understand why that changed. Well, that's what I thought. But then when I looked at the video, I saw that it was different. Being the most reasonable person in the room, I think, is the only way to recover from the defense attorney kind of handicap. You can't be objecting to stupid stuff. You can't be doing weird, like manipulative stuff on cross examination. You can't be condescending. You have to be the most reasonable person in the room at every stage.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting, and as a journalist, I certainly dealt with a lot of that. There's a lot of contempt, especially in recent years, for journalism, and a lot of times it was, look, I'm not. I always go back to Courtney Cox's character in Scream, who is like to me like one of the worst representations of journalism, and it was like. It's like I'm not gonna just all of a sudden put you on TV with you're gonna get I'm gonna get your permission. You're gonna be in. You have a lot of power here. You can walk away. You can uh, so is it? It sounds like there's a. I mean, that's just how I relate to it in my own experience. But there's like it sounds like you want to make sure that the jury. Goes back to like empowering the jury, um, and and by showing confidence,
Yeah.
right? Of just
Showing confidence in them, in the process. Yeah. Yeah. That, like, I think that some attorneys get the impression that they need to control the jury, they need to dictate to the jury. And I think that when you take the approach of trying to empower them and give them tools, that feels very different to them. I think it provokes less resistance and it's more of a realistic, it's just like the truth. Like sometimes we're in denial that they're humans and they're going to do what they're going to do, and we don't get to, we can't choose for them.
so. How do you deal with like that's about a jury, but then a lot of times you're in a plea. Most of the time, it sounds like you're in plea hearings, and you're
Yeah.
dealing with what usually a judge
Usually
or
the
a
prosecutor.
prosecutor.
Yeah.
Okay, so how do you then shift gears with that as your audience, and like how do you change your presentation, or do you?
I think it's very similar. The system trusts the prosecutor to know a lot of things that a jury might, because there's really restricted rules on the information that's allowed to go to the jury. So the prosecutor is going to have, you can show anything to a prosecutor and then they're going to decide what's relevant. But like, it's something that I've learned in parenting. Like, I every day have to be reminded that I cannot pick what my kids decide to do. I can try to influence it. I can try to persuade them. I can give them tools to hopefully be successful, but like they're gonna make their choices. And so like I think the same is true in a like sales conversation. Like somebody new calls me and says, I'm thinking about hiring a lawyer. Should I hire you? The worst thing I can do is try to persuade them. It will provoke resistance every single time. So instead, I try to say, okay, well, why do you want to have an attorney? Like, I expect it's because of these reasons. Are there any different ones in your case?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, like, help me, let me tell you about some people I've worked with before. If you want to work with me, here's what it would look like. But you do what you're going to do. Like, I want to empower them to make their own decision instead of trying to control it myself. I'm sure that people have had success by trying to control people, but it doesn't feel good to me, and it's usually not worked. So I feel like I have to just like accept, like, I don't get to decide if this client's going to hire me. I don't get to decide if this prosecutor's going to make the offer I want. All I can do is my part of it, which is to keep showing up and saying no until they say what I want them to say. Like, but I'm not gonna, and eventually we may have to go to trial. We may win, we may lose. Like, I don't get to control any of that. All I'm going to do is try to be prepared, prepare my client, and help them make good choices. And the process is going to work itself out.
And then we're getting close to wrapping up here, but I want to ask a couple questions I always ask everybody. Really, just is what are the biggest things that throw you for a loop? What are the real like the things that you don't want to have happen, or the things that are most challenging for you, and how do you deal with them?
The fourth quarter of 2024 was terrible for us financially. Like no one hired me. I don't really know why. Probably there's just, there's volatility and randomness. But, I've been doing this for a long time and I still, every time we have a bad little run, I'm like, it's broken. It's never going to work again. So I have to like remember that I'm going to feel that way and like try to talk myself through it. Like we've got a lot of evidence. We might have to make some adjustments, but so that's one. Um, I hate trial prep. I hate the night before a trial. Hate it. Don't sleep. Can't, my mind just can't let go. Just goes and goes and goes, goes circles. So I don't like that. Um, I did divorce for like a year
Mm-hmm.
and I couldn't let those cases go either. I don't know why, because like criminal cases are high stakes too, but for some reason with those cases, I just like couldn't create a professional amount of distance from them. And so after a year, I was like, I can't be doing this. It's unhealthy. Like I can't possibly do this. So I don't know. Those are three. Are there any of those like in the like neighborhood of kind of what you were asking? Are those?
Well, no, that's fine. That's a good, honest answer. But I'm saying, in just in terms of like as a criminal defense attorney, and you're in
Oh,
a case, what are the things that you're like, oh God, I don't want to deal with this, or like the things that are toughest to deal with that you see coming, and how do you deal with them?
I had a client once who his birthday was like 2 weeks after mine. He had a very similar like biography to mine up to a certain point in his life. His wife looked like my wife. Like I felt like I was looking in the mirror a little bit with this client. And he was accused of like some really heinous sexual stuff. And it was a difficult case for me because I kept thinking like one or two decisions in our lives and I'd be in his chair and he'd be in mine. Like I think that sometimes I can say like what they are dealing with, I have compassion for, but it's not something that I could see myself struggling with. Like I'm not like super violent. I don't want to shoot anybody. Like I'm good with I just thought like so sometimes if I can see myself a little bit too much in their shoes, that can be challenging. But there's not been very many cases where my clients did something. I've had clients who did horrible, horrible things. I've had clients who came to me and in our first meeting, they said, look, I'm charged with this. It's true. I did it. I already confessed. I want you to help me try to reduce the damage. Great. And
Mm-hmm.
something that's been unsettling to me is I've had clients in my office who have confessed and I know they did really horrible things and I wouldn't if I saw them in the street, I would have zero negative like vibe for them. I wouldn't have any sense that they were a quote unquote bad person, if that's even like a helpful term.
Right.
So yeah, so it's almost never been because of what the nature of what they did, but sometimes if it occasionally be so personal and so like related to something that's happened in my life that I'll be like, oh, this is going to be hard. Sometimes, once I know a little bit more about the case, that goes away. Sometimes it's not, and I have to really decide, do I want to stay with the case? Can I be loyal to this client? Do I want the hassle of trying to figure this out? Usually the answer is yes, but sometimes it's no.
Okay, cool. And then the last question I always ask everybody is just if you, um, what have you learned in the course of your career that that others outside of it might be surprised by, that like is notable to you? And another way of framing the question is, and it's a little cheesy, but just like if you could go back and tell yourself as a young man, like before you got into law or right out of law school, like something you learned that is notable or interesting that you might not realize, what would you say? What is that?
Hmm. Um, it's kind of a marketing thing. Um, I think what I would say is the faster you can serve someone, the more likely they're going to want to work with you. So, like in the initial consultation, my job is to try to reduce their anxiety, their stress, their fear. And if you do that, then you don't have to convince people. You don't have to try to strong arm them. They'll want to. Um, so I think that kind of helps in my trial work because the jury has a job to do and they want to see if someone who's going to help them do their job or make it more difficult. So the sooner, the faster I can serve somebody, the more likely it is that they'll trust me and want to do more with me. I don't know why that's such a, I don't know, that's not, I wish it was something about like, how, even guilty people are good people and I believe all that. I think that's true, but I don't know. That's been maybe the biggest surprise is that like being generous and helping quickly, um, it builds trust much faster than trying to control someone or convince them to do what you want.
Like what? What do you mean? Like, what would you do quickly for somebody?
So like in the initial client consultation, like I used to think like my job is to list all of the reasons that I'm the best lawyer for the case.
Hmm.
And like no one responds to that. It never helps. But if they come in and they say, I'm really anxious that I'm going to go to jail, and I say, I can't guarantee you you're not going to go to jail. There are some maximum penalties in this kind of case that are kind of scary, but let me tell you about somebody I worked with last month who was charged with the same thing, and here was their outcome. And they go, oh, okay, well now I can at least visualize one path this might take. And I try to be really clear. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen in your case, but that's just because you have zero data points. Let me just give you a data point of somebody who's been in a similar situation. And
Hmm.
so like some attorneys, I think, can consciously try to increase their stress and be like, you need to hire me because if you don't, you're going to go to jail. You're going to lose your license. You're going to not be able to get a job in the future. I find that that is repellent. Like that doesn't, it repels clients. Instead, to be to be open with them and show them like here's the actual risk. Do you want to work with me? I think people are more attracted to that.
Cool. Great. Anything else you want to add here that you really want to get off your chest that we didn't touch on?
No, this is a fun chat. You have a good facility for being a listener and an asker of good questions. I see why you've been nominated for Emmys. Like
Thanks.
there's a real talent there.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate you saying that. And I really appreciate you coming and doing this. It's great. This is great talking to you. You're really interesting and fascinating stuff. Thanks a lot, Josh. That's Joshua Barron, criminal defense attorney in Lehi, Utah. Great having him on, and thanks to you for checking out Make Your Case. If you found this episode worthwhile, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And if you're a lawyer looking to present your case more persuasively, whether in mediation, settlement talks, or in court, go to cleareyedmedia.com. That's where we help attorneys nationwide turn facts into powerful video stories. If you're a lawyer with a case or an experience you think would make a great podcast episode, shoot me an email at joe@cleareyedmedia.com. I'd love to hear about it.